We believe in the forest as homes for other people, other nations of beings, our brothers and sisters. We believe in the trees existing for their own right. We don't think that we should have to prove to Pacific Lumber that they are worth anything ecologically, scientifically, economically. They have a right to exist because they've existed for the past 1,200, 2,000 years. That is enough. That is what we've believed in. I'm a member of the Pasquayaqui Nation. For the last 600 years, we've been resisting the same type of colonization that Pacific Lumber is continuing to inflict on our forests in Northern California. 100 years ago, my ancestors used to be sold in the auction yards of Los Angeles and Ciudad Obregón, Mexico City. You could buy our people just like you could buy those trees. Those people embrace the same principles of life as being a commodity and property as Pacific Lumber, Charles Hurwitz, Paul Schwartz, the people here in your community hold. This is a struggle that I was born into. I did not have an option to not fight against the destruction of my people and my planet. You people have a choice. But like Artemis said, it's hard to watch something like that when you can do nothing. We're here today to tell you about something that you can do. It is within your power to stop this. I'm not just trying to float your boat here. I'm being honest. Things do not change in this world because of governments. Things do not change in this world because of state agencies and organizations. They change because of people like you and me. People taking social responsibility for the actions of others. In my culture, we call ourselves the five-finger people. And we see ourselves as being responsible for the actions of our own people. And in that same way, you people as members of the Houston community have an obligation to stand up and have your voice be heard and tell other members of your community, we will not do this in the name of Houston, in the name of Texas, in the name of America, in the name of the protection of our natural heritage for our children, for ourselves, for our great-grandchildren, and for the sake of our ancestors. As I said before, my ancestors died fighting for the very same things that we fight for up in Northern California. They were murdered, much as people are being murdered today fighting for the very same things. Not just in Central America and South America and other parts of the world, but right here in America, right here in Northern California, in Humboldt County. Members of Pacific Lumber have killed nonviolent protesters and never spent a day in jail. They have repeatedly used physical violence on teenage kids. They have repeatedly taken pepper spray and applied it directly to the eyes of young women when they were physically locked down and unable to defend themselves. These people have no morals. These people have demonstrated what they believe in. And it's up to us to say no more. It's no more time to talk. It's no more time to negotiate with these people. If they want us to negotiate and talk, they need to stop the violence. When they've demonstrated a ceasefire in the woods against the trees and nonviolent protesters, I'll talk. I'll sit with Charles Hurwitz. Let's have a beer. But until then, until he stops waging violent war on the environment and the people that are defending the earth, I have nothing to say to that man. I will not negotiate with terrorists. These people That's what these people are. They're hostage takers. They hold the forest ransom like they did with the Headwaters deal. They didn't donate one single thing to us. They didn't donate one redwood leaf, let alone a tree or a forest. We had to pay over, the taxpayers, you and I had to pay $100,000 an acre for that Headwaters forest. Way beyond the market value for that land because Charles Hurwitz took full advantage of our love for this place to get as much money as he could out of it. He knew that we did not want to see this land destroyed, and all he could think about was dollar signs. You want to talk about how much money this guy makes? In the quarter that ended March 31st, he made $68 million alone in a 3-month period off the redwood forest of Northern California. Another $11 million off the ancient forest, Douglas fir forest. Talk a lot about the redwoods that Pacific Lumber cuts down. They also cut down ancient madrone and pine forest in the Mattole watershed. They own 211,000 acres of land. They love to use that. They love to say this is private property. Let me tell you how they got that land. In the 1860s, the people of Eureka, the timber people who wanted that land, went to an awakening ceremony that the Wiyot tribe held every year at the beginning of spring in Humboldt Bay. They knew that these people had been doing ceremonies for days and days, and during the day that they were sleeping and tired. They snuck into those camps before dawn, knowing that guns would set off attention. They took clubs and knives and axes, and they butchered and mutilated the people of the Wiyot community so that they could have their land. And they got that land for 5 cents an acre. Ever since then, they have been claiming that they own that land. Now let me tell you another story. 1985, deregulations of the savings and loans industry by Ronald Reagan. Charles Hurwitz took Texas United Savings and Loans, all those pensions, all those monies of people, and that is what he used to do a hostile buyout of Pacific Lumber. He took that money because of the deregulation that prevented him from using it in such investments, bought Pacific Lumber, and of course the United Savings and Loan failed, as it was destined to do. And when it did, what happened? The Federal Insurance Commission, who insures savings and loan, came out, and once again, we the taxpayers bailed out United Savings Loans to the tune of over $1 billion of taxpayer money that was used to finance the fraudulent dealing and acquiring of Pacific Lumber. We paid for Pacific Lumber, not Charles Hurwitz. We own all the assets that Pacific Lumber claims to own. We own the forests. We own the trees. They are your home. They are the homes to endangered marbled murrelets, to red tree voles, to the northern spotted owl, to numerous species that are threatened with extinction. Extinction. That means forever. That means that once these beings are gone, there's no bringing them back. Not to mention scientists that have no idea of what it means to remove one species out of the environment, one people, one nation. I don't like to call them species. They're nations, and their people and their villages. They have their own language, their own culture, their own way of life, just like we do. They love their children just as much as we love our children. They are willing to protect their children every bit as I much hope that you are willing to protect this land. These animals, this habitat of theirs, this deal that Charles Hurwitz made with not the people of California, not the people of the United States, but with other brokers of power and influence and politicians, the Headwaters deal I'm talking about, they made a deal whereby for 120 years Pacific Lumber was given permits to log based on sustainable yield plans that last month a judge ruled after a 4-year court battle. We've been waiting to get this case before them because we knew all along that Pacific Lumber has been illegally chopping down ancient trees and killing endangered species. We've known that. We've had the evidence. We've had the proof. And once again, finally, the judge verified that last month when a Superior Court judge in Humboldt County found the Habitat Conservation Plan, which was the deal made with the state government, to be invalid and illegal and fraudulent. The sustained yield plan that Artemis talked about being tripled after Maxxam's buyout was non-existent. They didn't even have a proposal for one when it was given approval. They were basically given a blank piece of paper for their sustainable yield plan, and the government put the rubber stamp on it. That was one thing that the judge found wrong. The other thing that the judge found wrong was the incidental take permit. Incidental take permit, that's a fancy terminology for killing endangered and threatened with extinction animals. The incidental take permit that Charles Hurwitz obtained through his fraudulent hostage-taking and terrorist threats against the people and the land of Northern California gave him permission to this day to kill 340 marbled murrelets listed on the highest level of the Endangered Species Act. These seabirds desperately need old-growth forests to survive. Their feet are webbed. They can't land on small tree branches. They need the thick, mossy canopies of old-growth trees to survive. I've been in these forests. I spent all winter defending them, and I'll spend the rest of my life if I have to defending them. I'll die defending them if I have to. And I wish that was a statement that was just rhetorical, but unfortunately, as I said before, these people have proved their commitment to violence every bit as much as we have proven our commitment to nonviolence. You know, my first Pacific Lumber demo was in 1988. They were doing the same things then that they're doing now. Since that day and before that day, since 1985, when Earth First launched their campaign against Pacific Lumber, not one single individual has been injured by our actions. Pacific Lumber cannot say the same thing. as I stated before. They've killed people, they've injured people, not to mention the abuse and the legal actions they have taken against us. One of the things that they've done to tree sitters when they remove them is they file a civil suit against them, claiming that they've cost them lost revenues to try to reclaim their money that they've lost by having our brothers and sisters sit in these trees. This is the guy we're dealing with. This is a criminal operating in your community who hires other criminals. Michael Milken, who went to prison for fraudulent inside trading, he helped finance Pacific Lumber deal. Eric Schatz, the one individual who was hired to remove tree sitters at the threat of their lives, he's a wife beater. In 1992 and 1994, he was charged not once but twice with willful infliction of corporal injury on his spouse, beating his wife. This is a man that is not a licensed arborist, let alone an emergency medical technician to remove people in these situations. This is an individual with a history of violence towards women who, with the government of Humboldt approval, is being used to forcibly evict women using violence from these trees. What is wrong with this picture, people? We have a government in Northern California that allows a corporation to take a wife beater, send them into the forest where there are young women, peaceful, pacifist, nonviolent, committed women, placing themselves in harm's way to protect these trees, and this guy rips them from the trees. Do they give them a medal? No, they throw them in jail and hit them with that civil suit. You know, these people are the ones that they call eco-terrorists. How dare they? How dare they call us, the people with not one single drop on our hand, let it be human or animal, call us terrorists, while they themselves rape and destroy and mutilate the forest. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been in these places. I've seen these ancient trees with the blue lines around them. I've seen the spotted owls nesting in their branches. Spotted owls that are probably dead since the last time I was out there. I'd like to say that that judge who made that ruling had an impact, that even corporations have to abide by the law. They don't. This is what Robert Manning, the president of Pacific Lumber, had to say about Judge Golden's decision. Judge Golden indicated that he understood and accepted the importance of the company's continued operations while the state agencies fix procedural mistakes made during the implementation of the Headwaters transaction. He also says, we look forward to the resolution of this matter to provide unquestioned protection for the Headwaters forest and allow Pacific Lumber to continue our lawful, environmentally protective, and sustainable operations. This, besides being an outrageous statement, is a statement that means to us as forest defenders that they will not honor the judge's ruling. They are going to continue to go into those woods. They're going to cut down those trees with spotted owl's nests. They're going to cut down the trees with marbled murrelet nests and red tree vole nests, the trees with our people in it. They're going to go out there. They're going to continue to remove the tree sitters that are in there. And I'm not going to stand by and let that happen, and I hope you won't either. I'm not going to wait until another one of my friends dies or is threatened with death by a scum like Eric Schatz. Now, I'm not saying that we need to do the same thing to them that they do to us. That would negate everything we believe in. We are a movement based in compassion, respect for life, honesty, and sustainability and harmony with all living beings, whether they be human or non-human. That is our overriding principle, and we will never waver from that. That is what keeps us separate from them. That's what keeps that eco-terrorist label from sliding right off our backs, is because at the end of the day, any rational person can look at the record and see that we have never harmed anybody. The people that are always throwing around the label of eco-terrorists are the people that are operating on a daily basis with on the destruction of life. People that are murdering and destroying irreplaceable wilderness and the animals that live in them. Those are the people calling the kettle black. And those are the people that we're up against. How do we stop them? That's why we're here today. We came here because we have to bring it to their homes. We have to hold the people accountable who are making the decisions to allow this travesty to take place. 50 years from now, our children are going to look back and they're going to say, why didn't you guys do something to stop this? I don't care what the law says. That's That's what we're here to talk about. That's what we're here for. We're here to talk about what you and I and everybody collectively can do. I don't care what organization you come from. I don't care what religion you believe in. I don't care what color your skin is. If you're concerned about the destruction of the earth, as every human being should be, that is why we're here to talk to you. And the pressure that we need to put on is on the people who make the decisions, the people who give the orders to cut down those trees with our friends in them, the people who give the orders to Eric Schatz to go up into the trees and hog-tie women and use pain compliance holes. Those orders come across the phone lines from office buildings and houses in your community. And those are the people that it is time to hold accountable for their terrorist attacks on our natural heritage.
Yes.
Those are the people that we will demonstrate at, not 2 weeks from now, but tomorrow. Tomorrow we will take it to their house, to their homes, and we will instigate a citizen's arrest against the violators of the Endangered Species Act. I've been an environmentalist now, working full-time on this stuff for like 20 years. The things that we have accomplished, which aren't many legally, are the things that we hold faith in working to protect the environment. And of those things, the three cornerstones are the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Endangered Species Act. And the absence of state agencies doing their job and enforcing those regulations and arresting those people who are in violation of those laws, in the absence of them doing that job, it is upon you, the citizenry, to do that for them. And that is what we are going to do here in Houston. Not just tomorrow, not just Monday, but every day until this destruction stops. There is no more time to talk, folks. This is something that we have to do in our generation. Ecologically speaking, we are the generation that stands to do either the most for the earth or the least. It's up to us. People say now that if we do not take action to prevent the irreversible destruction that's being done on our environment, not only will species fall into extinction, but as I said before, this whole network, this web that is woven together that keeps the Earth as a healthy planet, not just for spotted owls and retrievals, but for humans too, will fall apart. You know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if you're on a spaceship, like the Earth, using a horrible analogy, can be compared to being, the last thing you're going to do is be pushing buttons and pulling wires and throwing out parts out the window, as if you could roll out the window in a spacecraft. But you get the idea. But that is what people are doing here. And in the absence of these agencies, these governments, these corporations, I don't even expect them to be responsible. But in the absence of any of those people doing the right thing, it is up to us to stop them and up to us to hold them accountable. That is the only thing in the history of our country, in the history of most social change movements, that has ever affected change. Not polite politicking, not writing letters, but letting the people in power who think they're in power know that we won't stand for it. And when they see people in Houston taken to the streets, going to Maxxam Corporation, going to Charles Hurwitz's house and country club and everywhere else this terrorist goes, and we take it to the streets and remind those citizens of this town what it's about, watch. Things are going to change. Because that is setting a dangerous example in their eyes for people to become empowered to take action to uphold the laws that we fight so hard for. That is what we are trying to accomplish in this campaign. And it's something that, as I said before, we don't need more people than what's in this room. I've been an activist for over 20 years, as I said, and most of what I have accomplished has been done with a handful of people, 3 or 4, 5 like-minded people. I am overwhelmed with hope when I see the number of people that are in this room, because like I said, this is all I hope for. I know we live in you folks live in the 4th largest city in the country, but I don't expect millions of people to rise. All we need is 50, 60, 100 people, and the rest will follow suit. When people are shown the courage of the individual to stand up against what is wrong, whether we know it or not, they're going to agree with us, because they're going to know in their hearts that what we're doing is right. And they may not have the courage that you or I have to stand up and face Charles Hurwitz and the Maxxam Corporation, but I can tell you one thing, that's what heroes are. And that's what we need in this country, is heroes. We need Harriet Tubmans, we need Robin Hoods, we need Geronimos and Crazy Horses. Just as much as we look up to those people in the past, things that they did, do you think they were called heroes in their time? No, they were called criminals and terrorists. But now we know, we have the insight to know that what they believed in was righteous and true. And thank God that they believed in those things and would not compromise. Otherwise, some of us might still be in those auction yards in Los Angeles and Mexico City. That is what we have to stand up to, and that is our job to do in this town now. I would like to say that this is something that can be done without any expense to ourselves, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. You know, we've seen people injured. I've been in the woods and seen those burly, no-neck, I call them orcs. You guys see Lord of the Rings? That's what these guys are. These are the orcs. And just as much as when you watch that movie and you're cheering with Treebeard trashes Sauron, that's what we got to do to Pacific Lumber. Let's not cheer it on a movie screen. Let's cheer it in real life when it's happening to our forests in our own homeland. That is what we got to do. But it's going to come at a price. Many people in this campaign have gone to jail. On the bright side, they spend usually a very short time there, and they're given their freedom again. Many of them show up the very next day back in the woods. Some people have been the victims of violence. Luckily, you know, some of my friends that have been pepper sprayed, they haven't been discouraged. They're still back out there fighting again. You know, I spent 4 years in federal prison for rescuing over 200 mink, coyote, and other animals from animal research laboratories where they're being forcibly fed toxic substances. In a day and age like now where such things take place, it's just as things that Pacific Lumber does, I am proud to say I sat in a prison for doing those things. I would much rather have been in prison for that 4 years than having been free for 4 years and done nothing to stop it. Likewise, that is the sacrifice we have to be ready to make now. It's not going to be that big of a sacrifice. As I said before, we might find ridicule from our friends, from our family, from our coworkers. We might lose our jobs. You know, we might have the cops tackle us and take us to jail. We might get pepper sprayed. That is such a small price to pay, people, for the preservation of this forest. I mean, so many of us. I don't know your histories, but I bet you know, all the assets that Pacific Lumber is worth, that somewhere in your past, in your heritage, you have people that fought and struggled so that you could have the life that you live today. And they fought, and they made those sacrifices, not so that we could be driving around in Lexus and playing with Game Boys and computers and emails and all that stuff, but so that we might do the very same thing that they did and stand up for what we believe in. This is what that's going to look like. It may take the form of fighting for the redwoods today. It might take the form of fighting for your forest tomorrow. But whatever it might be, we have to be American heroes. We have to stand up against the real terrorists because they live amongst us, not in the Middle East. They are right here in the Galleria building and in the Maxxam building and elsewhere. So for those of you who are interested in helping out in the struggle, I beg of you, I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll get down on my knees, people. Please. Come to this demo tomorrow. Help us. We're going to be doing a planning session. We're going to be strategizing. This isn't anything that we're just trying to get you to do what we want to do. We want to include you in that process. Come to the event we have tomorrow. Tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want to do. You know, let's make a collective decision. Let's show them what democracy looks like. Real democracy. We know what their democracy looks like, and I don't want any part of it. I'm still proud to be an enemy of the United States. I don't know about you people. Do we have flyers?
Yeah.
I got some small flyers for the convergence space that we're using tomorrow to plan our demo. But you know, I am so inspired in my time here. I just got here last night. We stayed up till 5 o'clock last night talking about what we were going to do this weekend to stop Maxxam. I wish we had the resources that Pacific Lumber has, but we don't. But that's okay. We don't need them. We have our hearts. And that is the strongest weapon we need. You people are here today because you have a spark in your heart that told you something was wrong. We're here to turn that spark into a fire. And we're here to put that fire where it belongs, under the feet of Maxxam officials in Houston, Texas. So, I'm going to just leave these up here. Take one only if you think you're going to come, or if you can pass it on to people that can come. Like I said, I was inspired so much with the crowd here that rather than just plan an action on Monday like we had thought, we want to do something tomorrow. Hey, it's Sunday, right? You guys got anything better to do?
Take it home.
Let's take it home. You know, let's go have a picnic. You know, let's go let these people know that we've seen enough destruction of irreplaceable wilderness. That 1,200-year-old trees deserve to live. Is that such a radical concept? All I'm going to say in closing, well, actually, I'm going to take, I got like 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
I just want to tell a short story. I talk about it when I give lectures. But it's something that I heard from my son's mother. She's Anishinaabe from Michigan, and I was spending some time over there a couple summers ago, hanging out with the old ones. And I learned their creation story. And I talk about that creation story because it is a parallel to what I believe we have to do today, as most of the indigenous storytelling is. It's the roadmap that we were given by our elders to know how to survive. You know, it's a simple formula, people. You know, live peaceably and simply so that other people could peaceably and simply live. You know, we're not asking for much. We're just asking for them not to kill us. So along those lines, the story begins with the world being polluted and destroyed and corrupted, much as the same way as it's becoming today, by, once again, human people. Creator saw the world being destroyed in this way, and his heart was broken, and he decided to end the world. He decided to flood the world and start over again. But before he did that, he called Beaver together, and he had Beaver come to him, and he sent Beaver out to all the other animal people, and he says, go to the animal people and gather one of each gender of these animals and bring them to me. Now, I know this kind of sounds biblical, but it's not. It's much older than the Bible. Once he gathered the animals together at the base of a sacred tree, he put all those animals up in the branches of the tree. And while the animals were up in the branches of the tree, he flooded the earth. And when he flooded the earth, I'm just using he, but I'll tell you what my elders tell me. They say they don't know what creator is. It could be he, she, it, whatever. For the simplicity, he, she, it. He flooded the world. And when the world became flooded, this tree uprooted, and all the animals that were on the tree, including original man and original woman, floated in the ocean that covered the earth. And many of those animals began to lose faith in Creator's decision, and they began to question what they were going to do to survive. And of those animals, man was the first one to say, I'm going to jump off this log. I don't care where I'm going. I don't care if I drown. I just can't sit here any longer. You know, a lot of the animals who were on the tree had no lost love for man. They knew what he had done to them. So they said, okay. You know, but some of the other animals, Bear, notably in his infinite wisdom, said, no, you know, we have to remember, you know, that we were placed here by our Creator. There is wisdom in this. But they didn't believe that. The humans didn't believe that. And so man jumped off the log. And he flailed about in the ocean for a while, and sure enough, after a while, he started screaming for help. Now, all these animals that had been suffering and tormented by man, they turned their backs. They just said, look, we're in this situation because of man. The last thing we need is to help him out again, so he can do it to us again. But despite that, 7 nations of animals stepped forward. And those 7 nations wove their tails together in a rope and dipped them into the water. And man grabbed onto that rope and he climbed out of the water back onto the tree. And because of his rescue by those 7 animal nations, those nations are the principal totem animals of the Anishinaabe nation to this day. Because without them, the Anishinaabe people would not be alive. Once man had gotten back on the tree, he apologized for his actions and he asked the animals for their forgiveness. And he says, look, I'll help you find a solution. I got an idea. He said, we'll call forward to the Manitou, my father, the northwest wind. We'll go down to the bottom of the ocean and gather some of the earth from below there, bring it up to the surface, and when we get this earth, we can take it to the Manitou spirits and ask them to breathe life into it. And with that, we can create a new home. The animals were actually like, hey, this sounds like a good idea. So they did this, and they recruited the help of the fish people. And the fish people dove to the bottom of the ocean, gathered some of the earth. But by the time they reached the surface where the animals were, all the earth had flowed through their gills, and so they didn't have anything to show for their efforts. So the animals decided to ask for Loon's assistance. They knew Loon was a deep-diving bird and that if anybody could get the earth, it would be her. Loon agreed, and she dove to the bottom of the ocean. But as she approached the depths of the ocean, she realized that it was much deeper than she had thought, and she didn't have enough air in her lungs to dive that far. And in her failure to achieve this task, she was so heartbroken and sad that she just never went back to the animals and she went off by herself. And to this day, that is why you'll always hear Loon alone crying. It's because of what she was unable to do. Now the animals were really at a loss for what to do. They didn't know who else to ask for help. And so they stood around and they were trying to figure out a solution. And at that point, little muskrat, just a little man like this, he stepped forward and he says, I'm going to go to the bottom of the ocean and gather that earth. And all the other animals said, don't be crazy, muskrat. You're just a little thing. You're going to kill yourself. And his wife was the first person to say, yeah, what are you thinking? Think about your children. She was pregnant at this time with Muskrat's children. Muskrat man turned to his wife and said, I am thinking of my children. And when he said that, he dove into the water. And he dove, and he dove, and he dove. And he got to that same point where Loon had reached, where he knew he no longer had enough oxygen to survive if he was going to accomplish what he had to do. But he knew the fate of the world rested on his shoulders. And when he got close to the bottom of the ocean, he released his last breath, knowing that he was going to die. And when he did that, he reached the bottom of the ocean, he took 2 fistfuls of earth in his hands, and he died. And his body floated to the surface of the water. Just about the same time that the other animals were wondering what had become of him, they saw his little body floating on the surface. And they rowed over to him, and they pulled his body out of the water. And it's only when they did that they saw that earth in his hands. And they took that earth, and they placed it on the back of the turtle. And they took that earth to the man and 2 spirits. And he breathed new life into it. And a new world was born. That's the world that we live in. And that's the world that's being destroyed again. And that's the world that we have to make a sacrifice now, like Muskrat, if we are to survive. I'm sorry, but I have a hard time not getting emotional about this. I took my son 3 weeks ago into the Mattole wilderness to see the forest that Pacific Lumber wanted to kill. And I took him to those trees. And we prayed. And we knew that those trees were probably going to be dead. But I wanted him to see that forest before it was gone. I don't ever want to have to take him on another trip like that again. I want to take him into those woods and say, this is the forest that the people of Houston stood up for and defended. And because of that, people like me and you and people like my son and all these other people, that is what we achieved. That is what we can say. It's up to us. It's up to the muskrats of the world. Thank you very much.